Hi everyone, we're now going to move on to exercise 21-8. Here we're going to do income statements under both the absorption costing method and the variable costing method at two different levels of manufacturing. So you'll see here that when we're dealing with an absorption income statement here on the board, you can see that this is the format we learned in 116A. So we've got sales minus our cost of goods sold equals gross profit, and then we subtract selling and administrative expenses to get to operating income. When we do the variable costing income statement in the second part of the problem, you can see it's set up differently. Remember, this is not GAAP for variable, but we start out with sales. Then we calculate out our variable cost of goods sold. So that's going to be total cost of goods manufactured less the ending inventory will give us variable cost of goods sold. And sales minus variable cost of goods sold equals something called a manufacturing margin. So that's in between what the contribution margin is. So the manufacturing margin's left over. Then we're going to subtract variable selling and admin expenses to get the contribution margin. Then we have our fixed costs, fixed factory overhead, fixed selling, administrative, total fixed costs come to operating income. So it's the longest problem you have. Again, I would probably print this up. I'd go on Cengage and print this up off that ungraded assignment. But here's the information that we've been given. They tell us that prior to the first month of operations ending October 31st, Marshall Incorporated estimated the following operating results. So they determined that sales would be 40,000 units, $90 per unit for a total of $3,600,000. And then their manufacturing costs at 40,000 units were estimated that direct materials would be $1,440,000, direct labor would be $480,000, variable factory overhead would be $240,000, and fixed factory overhead would be $120,000. And then they have us looked at our fixed selling and administrative costs and our fixed and our variable selling and administrative costs. So the problem, we're going to do the absorption costing. We're going to do it at 40,000 units. That's where they started off, and that's where all of our numbers are coming from. The problem tells us sales are $3,600,000. I'm going to put this up here because it's 40,000 units times $90. So that's the first step, easy peasy. Next, we want to calculate out the cost of goods manufactured at 40,000. So under absorption, manufactured, we're going to take that direct materials of 1,440,000, our direct labor of 480,000, our variable factory overhead of 240,000, and our fixed factory overhead of 120,000. So when we look at that at 40,000 units, that total amount comes to 2,280,000. And that's at 40,000 units. So then I can come over here and under my cost of goods manufactured, I'm going to put, and you want to enter this as a negative number of $2,280,000. The problem goes on to tell us, they say they only manufactured 40,000 units. That's what they sold. So there's not going to be any ending inventory on October 31st. So the total cost of goods sold is going to be $2 million. Remember, that's a negative number, $280,000. That gives us our total cost of goods sold. And then we're going to calculate out the gross profit. Again, that's sales minus cost of goods sold. That comes to $2,280,000. I just want to make sure. I think I'm looking on the wrong way. That comes to $1,320,000. So we've we've got that. And then we've got to subtract our selling and administrative. We've got fixed selling and administrative of 75,000 plus 200 of variable. So that comes to $275,000. So then we can calculate out our operating income of $1,045,000. So that one's fairly easy, fairly straightforward. The problem goes on to say that the company is evaluating a proposal to manufacture 50,000 units instead of 40,000 units. Thus, we're going to have an ending inventory of 10,000 units. Manufacturing the additional units will not change our sales, so we'll still only sell 40,000 units. Unit variable factory overhead costs, total fixed factory overhead costs, or total selling and administrative expenses. So we're not going to see any changes even here in our selling and administrative expenses. So what we have to do, first thing, they told us sales would be the same. So we're still going to sell 40,000 units at $90 a unit. So that's going to give us total sales of $3,620,000. But now we have to calculate out the cost of goods manufactured for 50,000 units. So what we have to do there is first we have to come up with the unit variable costs of production. So remember, those are going to be our direct materials, our direct labor, and our variable factory overhead. So we're going to start with, we need to have total variable costs. And we're going to look here again at 40,000 units. So we're going to have direct materials of 1,440,000, direct labor of 480,000, variable factory overhead of 240,000, and that gives us our total variable cost per unit of, that comes to a total of 2,160,000. So the total here is 2,160,000. And so if we divide that by 40,000 units, that's going to give us a total of $54 per unit. Okay, so now what we can calculate out, and they told us fixed factory overhead wouldn't change, so now we can calculate out the amount for our cost of goods manufactured here. So we're going to take at 50,000 units, so I don't have a lot of room here, let me, I like doing my own home whiteboard. So the first thing we're going to do is calculate out variable costs, variable product costs at 50,000 units. So we're going to take that $54 unit cost, variable cost here. We're going to multiply that times 50,000 units. And that's going to give us a total amount of $2,700,000. And then we can add to that our fixed factory overhead costs. So then we've got fixed FOH at 50,000. And that's going to equal the 120,000. So if we add those two together, 2,700,000 plus the 120,000 of fixed costs, we're going to get cost of goods manufactured at 50,000 units of 2,820,000. And that's going to go up here for 2,820,000. We discussed this previously, but we now have an ending inventory. So once we know the total cost of goods manufactured at 50,000 units, we can calculate out the unit cost at 50,000. So our unit is done by taking the 2,820,000 cost of goods manufactured, dividing it by 50,000 units, and that's going to give us a total of $56.40 per unit under absorption costing. So now we can calculate that out, and we can multiply that by our 10,000 units in ending inventory. So we've got ending inventory 10,000 times 5640, and so that comes to $564,000. So that we're going to put in here. Remember, we're putting in cost of goods manufactured as a negative number. We're going to enter in the ending inventory as a positive number, $564,000. So we can calculate out our total cost of goods sold by doing the 2,820,000 and subtracting the 564,000 from that. That then comes to $2,256,000. After that, we can calculate out our gross profit. Gross profit is sales minus total cost of goods sold. That comes to $1,344,000. So we've got that. They told us that our total selling and administrative expenses wouldn't change. And of course that makes sense, right? Because we only sold 40,000 units. So it's not like our selling and administrative expenses would go up any. So that's going to give us operating income at 50,000 units manufactured of $1,069,000. And you can see here, the only change is that we produced more items, but we didn't sell any more items. So, but look, we see that our operating income increases by $24,000, and that's due to fixed factory overhead costs being inventoried into an asset, so we won't have to recognize those till we sell those items. All right, so that's how you're going to do the absorption income statement for this problem. I'm going to take a quick pause and move things over. All right, guys, so now we're going to finish this off, exercise 21-8. We did the absorption income statement. Now we're going to do the same thing using the variable costing income statement, again at 40,000 and 50,000 units. I'm going to grab an eraser here because some of my dollars look crazy here. So put it all in as we go. All right, so again, it's the same situation, only this variable costing income statement would be used internally. Absorption income statements are used externally. We're going to start doing it for 40,000 units. We're still going to use the information that was provided at the beginning of the problem. So they tell us that we sold 40,000 units at $90 per unit. So sales are going to be exactly the same, $3,600,000. Then in the next step, we're going to calculate out our variable cost of goods sold. So the first thing is variable cost of goods manufactured. We already calculated that. We calculated out the variable cost of goods manufactured here, where we added up the direct materials, the direct labor, and the variable factory overhead. So we already calculated that out. It's $2,160,000. Remember, you're going to put that in as a negative. Ending inventory, there is none under this scenario. And so we've got total variable cost of goods sold of $2,160,000. So once we have our total variable cost of goods sold, we can calculate out our manufacturing margin. We're going to take the $3,600,000. We're going to subtract this $2,160,000. That's going to give us a manufacturing margin of $1,440,000. From that, we're going to subtract our variable selling and administrative expenses, which they tell us over there are $200,000. And that's going to give us our contribution margin of $1,240,000. Oops, not negative. And remember that contribution margin is what's left over to take care of all these fixed factory overhead and fixed selling and administrative costs. So we're going to start off. The problem tells us fixed factory overhead. That one's $120,000. Fixed selling and administrative expenses are $75,000. So we have total fixed costs of $195,000. We're going to subtract the fixed costs from our contribution margin of $1,240,000, and we're going to end up with operating income of $1,045,000. So I'm going to pause 1 second just to erase some of this stuff on the board here. All right, last but not least, now we're going to do the variable costing income statement at 50,000 units manufactured. Remember, we're still only going to have $3,600,000 in sales because we haven't changed everything, and we haven't changed total sales. It's still 40,000 units. For our variable cost of goods manufactured, we actually calculated that over with this problem, and we've got it right here. So we already calculated it out. It's $2,700,000. And then our ending inventory is still calculated at $54 per unit. So ending inventory, where we've got $54 of variable cost per unit times 10,000 units. That gives us $540,000 for our ending inventory. And you can see it's $564 under the absorption costing. That's because of those fixed costs that are included in this inventory. All right, so we add back in our inventory, $540,000. We can now calculate our total cost of goods sold by taking the total variable cost of goods manufactured, subtracting our ending inventory for a total of $2,160,000. You're going to see that didn't change, right? Because of what we sold, we're just looking at variable. We can calculate out our manufacturing margin, which is still going to be $1,440,000. We're going to subtract those variable selling and administrative costs of $200,000. We only sold 40,000 units, so those aren't going to change at all. So that's going to give us a contribution margin of $1,240,000. We've got our fixed factory overhead of $120,000. Our fixed selling and administrative of $75,000 for a total of $195,000 in total fixed costs, and that gives us $1,045,000 for our operating income. So you can see it didn't change here, right? Because we're not hiding any of this fixed factory overhead and inventory like we're doing over there. We're writing it off, and so you see there's not a change in this. All right, so that's your longest problem. Make sure you email me if you have any questions on it, and we're going to be moving on to the next problem.